Hey, good morning, friends. Hello, hello, hello. I'm glad you are here today. Glad that I'm here today. Glad that we're in this place. We'll talk about this place a little bit more in a moment. Uh, don't know that some of you may recognize it. Good morning, everyone. How are you, friends? Good to see you on this very wintry day. Good morning, John. How are you this morning? You doing well? I'm sure you have some winter where you are as well. But today's feeling particularly wintry. Like we came across the Pine Barrens over in Plymouth this morning, and it was just out of a postcard with that icy snow just hanging on the branches as if it was just painted there. It looked like a model. It was just fantastically beautiful. Karen, good morning to you. Vicky, hello, hello. That sometimes those opportunities of beauty that just ambush you, where you're just like, "Oh, and are just some of the, to me, sometimes just the great encouragements of the day, um, because they're so not only are they unexpected, but they are, but they're just so free. They just a brisk 13-degree walk this morning. Holy smokes! Yep, that's chilly. So good morning. Morning, Vicky. Hey, Sherry Ladd. Glad you're here. Hope you're doing well. It's great to see you. Great to see your name. Good morning. But so good morning. Let's get going. Good morning, everybody. It is the 12th day of the 12th month on 2022, and on this at 11:11 on this Tuesday morning. And I'm glad you're here with us. I'm glad you're a part of this journey. I am standing here in the pulpit of Second Congregational Church in of Plymouth in Manomet. Second Congregational Church, Plymouth and Manomet. I've been here before. If you may have noticed, today's the 13th. Sorry. So, all right. Welcome on the 13th day of December. It's I know it's not Sunday. How's that? Um, Good morning. So this morning we are at Second Congregational Church in Manomet, here in Plymouth. This was the church that I began ministry in many ways. I was a student here in, I would say, 1996, 1997, somewhere in that time frame. Gives you a sense of how long ago that all happened. And I was an intern, and this church nurtured me and helped me into the craft that I would be called in ministry. It is adorable. It's a beautiful little spot. I love that this is the pulpit in which the Bible stands. That when you preach, you in fact put your sermon right on top of the Bible. You read from it. It is classically beautiful. Little church here on the corner. So if you ever should find yourself in Manomet, down in southern Plymouth, Massachusetts, I encourage you to stop by. It is a wonderful and beautiful fellowship here. Um, but I wanted to talk. But they are in the middle, and we're gathering here with the Massachusetts ministers this morning. So many of the other Mayflower ministers that are a part of our little gathering and group, we are meeting here today to share fellowship in these days, and it's which is always a fantastic encouragement to meet with other pastors and to meet with other churches and see what's happening. But one of the things that's happening here at Second Church Plymouth is that they are at this transition point between pastors. Their former pastor left about a year ago. They've had an interim pastor here over the past year. On the first of of January, um, uh, Reverend Bruce Hapelanian from Mansfield, Ohio, will take up the reins of pulpit of being the pastor in this pulpit. And they stand not just in Advent and not just in Christmastide, but in this moment of kind of waiting for Christ's birth, but they're also kind of waiting for a new pastor. Which, if you've ever been through this process with a church and or as a part of whether it's your church or First Congregational, or whether it was 4 years when the church, over 5 years now almost, when the church was getting ready to receive me back in September, there's this, it's this amazing time of space in between. It's an amazing time in our journeys, and that transitions actually, which is really what I wanted to set us up to talk about today, is this idea of transitions. It's said about in music that in music there's this way in which that the notes are fine, and then the spaces between the notes are a thing to master as well. But the greatest thing to master are the transitions. When we transition between keys, when one transitions between meter, that there's this that the transitions are actually everything in music. And I think in many ways we don't talk enough about transitions in our lives. I know for a fact, having journeyed with many people who have gone from their transition from the working world into the retired world, it's possibly the greatest transition that we don't talk about, the way in which our lives change, the transition between having children in a home and no longer having children in a home, the transition between welcoming a grandchild into the world and what it means to become a grandparent, the transition of being that child that goes off to school and leaves the house. That life, in many ways, it's been said this way. Life, in many ways, life is actually a long series of hellos and goodbyes. That life has this way, and if we're really honest with ourselves, it is this transition of this long series of hellos and goodbyes. And so I want us to look at, so Paul is talking to the church in Ephesus, and he's writing about it, and he says this as he's encouraging them to kind of so the church in Ephesus is having well, they're in transition. That's really the way that they were a church in transition, because up until the point they had been a group of they had been a group of people who were worshiping at the synagogue, were worshiping at the temple, and then with the change in the different environment and all that sort of stuff, they were kind of no longer welcome at the temple. So they ended up having to become their own group rather than being this little kind of sect of Judaism, which is what they were up until the point that Paul writes to them. Things shift for the church in Ephesus, is that they're no longer welcome at the synagogue, and they become a true church of Christ, a true church Jesus followers, a bunch of people who are trying to follow this Jesus guy. And this is what Paul is writing to when he's writing to the church in Ephesus. He's writing to this group of people who, and Ephesus it's like the richest place in the world in a way. That everybody there has done well. Everybody in Ephesus is they're the beautiful people, and at the synagogue it's no different. And in that they are part of the beautiful people of what it is to be, and all of that for the early Ephesian church, which some scholars now say, by the way, that maybe the church in Ephesus, when it was being pulled out of the synagogue, when it was no longer being this little Jesus cult within the the synagogue, and it became its own entity on its own, that may have been no more than 30 people. Think about that. The Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus, which has some of the most beautiful writing we'll find on what it is to be a part of the body of Christ. Some of the most encouraging instruction of what it is to be a part of a body that is not a part of the world, like, because that's what's happening to them. They're kind of being ejected out of this world, and it's not a bad world that they're being ejected from. It's a great one. It's where they have all the they have all the donuts and all the candies and all the fancy pants and all the lollipops, and so they're thrown out of that, and it may have been as few as 30 people. Think about that. And yet today, here I am standing in this sanctuary that first formed me, and that I'm standing in this, and the words that were said to them, I'm going to say to you. This is the long connection of what it is to be a part of this journey. So this is the beginning of the 4th chapter, and I just want to read the opening verse here, because that's what I want us to talk about. This little church is in transition. I have no doubt that as we approach this holiday, there are parts of your life that are in transition, that are changing, that are transforming, whether you want them to or not. That there are ways in which your communities, your families, your lives are changing and transforming, and are going from one thing to another. And here's Paul's word from the first verse of the 4th chapter. I, therefore, Paul talking about himself, that never happens. Therefore, Paul talks about himself a lot, by the way, if you don't know. I, therefore, the prisoner of the Lord, beseech you to walk worthy of the calling with which you were called. I beseech you to walk worthy of the calling of which you were called. Well, why do they need to walk, and what are they worthy of, right? That actually that when we stand in these moments of transition, when we're inviting a child to leave the home, when we're becoming a grandparent, when we're leaving the world of work, when we're going off to school ourselves, when we're a church like this one that I'm standing in right now that's getting ready to welcome a new pastor, when we're saying goodbye to people that we love that are headed into the world of spirit and headed into the world of the church triumphant, when we're in these transitions of life, to be worthy to walk out the worthiness of the call to which we were called. However you frame your call from God, and I think our calls are kind of as individual as a thumbprint. That we all have our own way in which we're called to live this out, because we're formed in our own way. But that thumbprint, that beautifully and wonderfully made way in which God has called you, that you might be worthy of it, that you might remember that there's that these transitions that are happening in your life, these journeys that you're being called to go on, are not separate from who you are and who you are called to become in God's life and God's kingdom. That God has not brought you to this moment, to this point of transition, to this thing that is about to change, to then abandon you there and throw you in the well. And even if you find yourself in a well, there is a way in which, even in the story of Joseph, we become rescued from even the places we find ourselves most abandoned. The greatest thing in the book of Job that Job does is not that he's holy all the time. He's actually a big fat whiny pants. Job whines more about the bad things that happen to him than anybody else. Job he sits in his pity party, possibly more than any other biblical character out there. Now, legitimately, a lot of bad things happen to Job. Not arguing that. He has reasons to have his pity party. But what Job does, and I think it's what Paul is encouraging this church in Ephesus that just got booted out of their little home, and where they have to find, that are now on this new adventure, that are now in this point of transition, that calls to each one of them what Job does, and what makes Job Job is that, and when everybody around him is saying, curse God and die, curse God and die, Job never breaks relationship with God. He stays true to who it is that God calls him to be. Does he whine about it? Yeah. Does it hurt? Yeah. Is he disappointed? Yeah. But he never stops the conversation. He never stops the call of being Job in the world. And it's my hope that you will never stop being the call of Andy, and being the call of Jamie, and being the call of Vicky, and being the call of Robin, and being the call of Linda, and being the call of Irene, and being the call of Cecile, and being the call of Donna, and being the call of Sherry and John, and each one of you, of being the call of Karen in this world. Because that, friends, is the salvation of the world. Is that when you show up to the transition of your life, every one of them, the ones that will break your heart right wide open, and the ones that will make you leap for joy, when you stand in each one of them and you say, here I'm called, and we aspire to be worthy of them. We just aspire it. Just try. And in that keeping the channel open, that keeping the conversation with God open about whatever the transition is that's coming in your life, in your day, in your moment, right here and right now, that alone, friends, is what this sanctuary behind me was built for. It's what the body in which your soul and spirit inhabit was built for. It's what the life and the breath and the song that God has given you to sing was built for. So my friends, be true to your call in the midst of your transition. As I'm praying for this little congregation here that is getting ready to welcome their new pastor, that they will be true to the call that they have of him and him to them. And that in all of it, God's grace and love and peace will bring you home to be a part of the body of Christ. All right, friends, that's my hope for you today. So glad to see each one of you. It is such an encouragement to me that you might all be a part of this journey. Peace and grace to each of you on this day, and we'll pick it up tomorrow with another 11:11.